Welcome to Off the Scale, the podcast where we dive deep into the journeys of the world's top short-term rental property managers. Join us as we uncover their secrets to scaling success, from pivotal milestones to the lessons learned through mistakes and triumphs. Hosted by Scale family members Damian Sheridan, Jan Paulo Vieiro, and Louise Brace. Off the Scale reveals what drives these leaders each day and the indispensable tools that propelled them to the top. Tune in for inspiring stories, actionable insights, and the ultimate blueprint for scaling your own short-term rental business.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Off the Scale podcast, in which we interview the leading short-term rental property managers from around the world. My name is Louise Brace, and today I'm delighted to introduce Nick Taylor from NOX Rentals Cape Town. Now, Nick is a seasoned short-term rentals professional, very much focused on developing a hyper-local and niche portfolio, and together with his team has a deep commitment to supporting the local community. This year, our Scale team were also thrilled to have Nick and the NOX team on board to launch the first Scale South Africa event. So welcome, Nick, to the Off the Scale podcast.
Thank you very much, Louise and the Scale team, for having me. Delighted to have this conversation and to talk a little bit more to the Scale community, which is growing from strength to strength every day. Great to see.
It is, and we're delighted to be speaking to you as well today. So, Nick, 21 years in business. So how does it feel to have been running an Airbnb business longer than Airbnb has actually existed?
Good question. So I can't take full credit for that. My business partner, Richard Marshall, my fellow owner here at NOX, actually started the business in 2003, and I joined him in 2006. And that was off the back of the little stint that I had in working in high-end hotels in London for about 5 years. I was working at the Red Carnation Hotel Group, came back to Cape Town for what was going to be 6 months. Towards the end of 2000, saw an advert on the Gumtree, sort of a Craigslist equivalent for somebody, which was posted by Richard, looking for somebody to help him with his tax returns and get his finances in order. So I said to him, sure, I can help you out with that for 6 months, and I'm heading back overseas. And I just remember Richard, kind of 1 minute doing the reservations inquiries and dealing with guests in our office, and the next minute getting into a car and driving 2 or 3 housekeepers around the Cape Peninsula with mops coming out of the back windows and all kinds of general chaos that one finds in a short-term rental startup. And really, really loved the industry from day one. Richard and I have been able to still be good quality partners. We're in a long-term marriage here, and are thoroughly enjoying it, and have enjoyed the growth and development and I suppose the maturity of the industry over the last sort of 10 to 15 years as technology has become more and more important for us to become more organized. So
what a journey.
Fascinating journey.
Hotels in London to tax returns to full-blown property management and obviously stayed in Cape Town. So give us kind of a little introduction, your elevator pitch for NOX Rentals, like, your location we know, but number of units, profile of property and guest.
Sure. So we tend to specialize in the medium to upper end markets. About 70% of our guests are long haul visitors. South Africa and Cape Town specifically is a highly regarded international tourism destination, and we attract guests predominantly from Western Europe, the UK, USA, and at this time of the year, we have a very strong Arab market. We get a lot of Saudi Arabian guests and guests from UAE who are generally escaping the heat and coming down to Cape Town. We currently manage around about 200 high-end villas and apartments. We're quite selective of the properties we take on. We don't want to manage thousands of units, but rather manage the right kind of inventory. We probably take on 4 in every 10 properties that we actually see and visit. Our sort of primary USP is to make sure that our properties have what we call tourism potential. They've got to have some form of uniqueness to it. And in terms of location, only in Cape Town and Cape Town's premium areas, and that is very intentional. We only want to be here currently and look at other verticals in the industry, such as real estate and various other services that are linked to our short-term rental business.
So when you started out together, obviously you kind of coming in at a slightly later stage, a couple of years after the business had been launched. What were the initial ambitions that you had for growing the company together?
Good question. I think at that point in time, it was just a case of making sure the guests were checked in on time and the houses were clean, which I think was challenge number one, as I think it is for most of us, just to get the operations right. Let's just make sure that the guests are happy. And then in about 2010, 2011, I mean, obviously South Africa hosted the Football World Cup in 2010, and we started to see a decent influx of tourism. And Richard actually went off and started a software business, which was called Razor back then, which then became Booking Pal, which is now PMS, which is primarily based out of the US. And I took on the sort of day-to-day operations and MD role. And at that point, it allowed us to actually start developing a bit more of a strategic plan. And since then, we've really, really been focused on just making sure that we are it's keeping to our USP, keeping to our market segments and not distorting our brand and reputation. Certainly over the last few years, we've been a lot more intentional about what we want to achieve as a company, how we want to grow, what kind of numbers we want to achieve, and also importantly, what we want to do in terms of cultural activities for the organization, what type of staff we're looking to attract, as well as initiatives to give back to the local community through sustainability initiatives and supporting disadvantaged members within our community and various social economic organizations.
That's cool. You have another side of the business, which you touched on a couple of minutes ago, which is the real estate side. So I guess you kind of have, in one respect, you are very niche and you keep to that niche in terms of your short-term rental business and the guests and the properties, the profile of the properties and the guests that you have. Talk to me a little bit about how or why you do it diversified into real estate investment as well.
That's a good question. It kind of happened a little bit by mistake. We were managing a beautiful home and one of our guests showed interest in buying it and asked us, the normal kind of question, hey, how much is this property worth in the market and how much money could I make from it if I rented it out through your program? And we started looking at this as a bit of an opportunity and managed to facilitate the transaction. Obviously, at that point in time, we weren't licensed to do real estate. So Richard and I went out to the market, used our network, and were able to attract the services of a principal who is a real estate professional. And he joined us as an equity partner in that business to be able to get the concept of providing real estate services into the market. And it was a fascinating time because it forced us to learn a lot more about the investment side of short-term rentals. And we suddenly realized that we had a bit of a golden nugget in that we have all this rental data and information in terms of performance. Obviously, as a full-service management company, we have not only a good idea of the revenue profile of each property and what makes a property exceed a sort of standard or average return, but also because we offer a full administrative service, we handle all the costs and expenses on behalf of the owners. We know exactly what the rates and municipal taxes are right down to the finest amount of detail. So that allowed us to be able to start working on a range of investment metrics to be able to create a really decent business case around each property that was on the market and for sale that might be suitable to a short-term rental product rather than a long-term rental for owners to move into. So only recently we really started to position ourselves as a short-term rental investment real estate company. That's where our niche is. We're not really interested in marketing or representing properties for sale that are perhaps more suitable to a resident or an owner that's going to move in. We really want to be able to provide good quality, true and honest investment data, which perhaps a normal real estate agency doesn't do. And we all know that real estate agents are very quick to market a property as Airbnb friendly or great Airbnb returns, but unfortunately they don't have all the underlying information to be able to actually back that up. We're not in the business of high volume selling hundreds and hundreds of apartments which are Airbnb friendly. But the average value of each transaction we sell is, and we want to make sure that when that guest who becomes an investor who then needs a management service, we're able to provide the management service, and we'll provide that for 3, 5, 7 years, whatever the horizon is. And when they want to sell, we sell. So it's a bit of a circle in terms of a guest becoming
long-term client relationship.
Absolutely, yeah. And the majority of our buyers are guests or specialist short-term rental investors.
Interesting. And so, I mean, obviously you probably are aware of what's happening in terms of kind of regulatory changes and, the kind of the idea of banning in certain cities here in Europe. What are regulations in South Africa, in Cape Town, sort of healthy enough that it's a good investment? You don't have issues like that there? Or?
You're talking about the elephant in the room currently, I think, Louisa. There are no regulations currently in South Africa. However, I don't think any market globally is untouched by existing regulations or proposed regulations. There is indeed talk of regulations here. At the moment, those aren't defined. We are actually off the back of the Scale conference that we had in March, which we hosted here in Cape Town. We've been able to form an association. It's called the South African Short-Term Rentals Association, SASTRA. And we currently have a working group of about 8 of us who are building that out, and we are creating a unified voice, as any association does, to be able to take a conversation straight through to the authorities who might be considering regulation which might not be appropriate or applicable. And I'd like to also thank Andy Fenner from UK Star, who's helped us tremendously with a lot of advisory work on that and getting us off the ground and telling us what to do and what not to do off the back of the UK Star's learnings. We expect that regulation will come in towards the end of December in 2024, beginning of 2025. How that looks and what it is, we don't know, but it's not going to change our course of strategy at this point in time until we know the details.
You're being prepared, which is important.
Absolutely.
Let me talk to you about your first win or that first light bulb moment when you thought, we're doing something really good here. This is really working for us.
When we started actually getting into the data and the analytics of how guests were having an absolutely phenomenal, unique experience, is when we started to go, you know what, we're actually creating something quite special here. We're not providing a commoditized accommodation for a night or two, head on the pillow, that kind of thing. And we started really diving into each one of our guest reviews and starting to see that, we're making a real difference on the guest experience. It can be somewhat daunting flying from a developed nation in the northern hemisphere into far-flung southern tip of Africa for a lot of our guests, and it takes them a lot just to get on their plane to come in the very beginning. But when we started realizing that the impact that we're having on their experience was something quite rewarding, and a lot of those guests wanted to come back and stay with us again, we started realizing, hey, we are to something, we're providing a great quality experience for our guests, and we're starting to see a lot of repeat visitors. My sort of learning from that is to really know who your guest is and to understand how many times they're coming back, what sort of markets they're coming from. We talk about being in business more than 20 years. When I joined Richard in 2006, we used to attend sort of major tourism and travel trade convention and try and attract inbound tourism tour operators that specialize in sending guests to Southern Africa because they want to come and see the Big Five and come and safari and come to South Africa. And we used to stand at these tourism conventions trying to attract a German tour operator, for example, to say like, hey, look, don't send your guests to the Hilton Hotel, rather come and experience a beautiful self-catering villa overlooking the ocean. And that was a little bit of a foreign concept for a lot of the tour operators and travel agents, but it contributed 70% of our business. And we still have those trade relationships in place now. And it's a really, really important supply side for us of our guests, because they are able to assist, the tour operators and travel agents are able to assist with a lot of multi-itinerary, quite complicated travel requirements to get around Southern Africa. And that obviously was completely changed when the OTAs came along into our space. We had to completely change our strategy to be able to provide our owners with a solution that was a little bit multi-pronged. So we currently market through the OTAs. Travel trade is still more than 30% of our business, and we still have a significant amount of direct bookings coming back.
Cool. And it's interesting that you mentioned as well, because you're completely right that when I think about Cape Town, South Africa, and for many people around the world, it's like a dream holiday. It's like that kind of once in a lifetime holiday. So the fact that you guys have created a business where, you turn that kind of one-time dream into something where people come back and do it again and again, that's something really amazing that you've achieved with NOX, I think. So well done for that. Okay, so on the
Well, I think thank you very much for that. But I think we're very fortunate to be operating in a market which is attractive and which is has high tourism appeal. So it does make things a bit easier.
So on the flip side, then, what would you could you share with us perhaps one of the biggest mistakes or one of the mistakes that you made along the way that you've really learned from, like not to do again?
Yeah, I mean, certainly over the last few years, it's been a lot easier to implement business operating processes, and that is off the back of technology. And I think in terms of the mistakes that we've made is being too reliant on at the recruitment phase and the interview phase to kind of go, right, we're hiring this person and they're going to make everything absolutely amazing and walk around with the golden wand and everything's going to take care of itself. And there was a bit too much reliance on the execution of all of our staff to achieve standards which hadn't been necessarily mapped out in very clear detail. So we've over the last 3 years or so implemented an entrepreneurial operating systems off the back of a model called Traction, but called Traction. It's the EOS model for operating, which I highly recommend to anybody looking to scale a business and get a little bit more defined in terms of building an environment of collaboration across teams with growing teams and a little bit more accountability. So to answer your question, the mistakes that we made initially were to not have those clear lines of deliverables, but ensuring that teams knew exactly what they were responsible for and what they weren't, and to make sure that there was a documented process that helped guide them along the way to achieving their KPIs and targets. And certainly over the last few years, we've been a lot more defined with that, and it's helped everybody to know what their place is and what's expected of them. And that fosters a really, really good collaborative environment and a lot of sort of teamwork instead of it just being a whole lot of chaos and noise, which can just cause undue stress and not create a great working culture. We focus very hard on that over the last few years.
Excellent. And so talking about just, you just mentioned, kind of a tool. Talk to me about tools and software. What are the indispensable tools that you could not do without during that scaling journey?
Interesting. I mean, back in 2004, 2005, there were no PMSs, right? There was some, but they were very hotel orientated. We actually used to send out an Excel spreadsheet of our availability for the next sort of 6 months or so, with blocks in the cells which indicated that the property was unavailable, and send it out on a Monday morning to all of our tour operators and travel agents across the world and say, right, here's our availability. We'll send you an update in a week's time. Rates were static, rates were in the different cells. Reservation dates were blocked out for whatever reason, either guest booking or an owner stay, and then would send an update the following week based on what inquiries we'd received. So, I mean, it's a different world. And
I know people that are still working on that system as well, and it does still work very successfully for them. They do it with tours, but they still have their kind of like indispensable Excel spreadsheet.
That's incredible. I'd be very intrigued to see one of those. And then obviously we saw our main hurdle back in the early 2000s was to try and distribute our inventory in an environment which our tour operators and travel agents could access. Before OTAs prompted the need for Richard to start building software, which was effectively a marketplace of our properties, which we would list out. So tour operators and travel agents could log in and run a live inquiry and obviously send that information through to their clients, their travelers. And then, various PMSs have come in and a whole lot of ancillary services. And, right now, I mean, we've very, very strong and fond guesty customers for a number of years. I think about 8 years or so. We would not be able to run our business with other tools such as minutes to monitor noise and guest conduct. We work in very large villas, which can at times attract large groups of people coming in for a celebration or something. We need to be sensitive to our neighbors. Minutes has been absolutely tremendous for us. We've been very loyal fans of Superhog and Know Your Guest. I think Leo tells me quietly that we were their first customer globally. So we adopted that tech journey with the Superhog team very early on. And more recently, we couldn't live without Price Labs, Guesty, and Boom. been early adopters of Boom also to handle our operations, which has been absolutely tremendous.
Amazing. What's up for the next couple of years? What are your plans kind of moving forward into the future?
We're going to stick to our strategy. We've got a 3-year vision that is to continue to be hyper local, make sure that we're doing things as efficiently as possible. I think we are moving to a point where we want to put more emphasis on our owner journey, and that's a critical component. I think we've been very guest centric as an organization. Not to say that we've neglected our owners, but I mean, we all know that owners are such an important component of the success of our businesses. We've got to respect our owners. We've got to respect the properties that they have. So we've developed out through Boom a very robust owner portal where they can start accessing all the information they need and being a little bit more proactive in terms of engaging with our owners on their rental performance and how their properties are in terms of upkeep and maintenance. We'll continue to build out our real estate team and the development as a short-term rental investment specialist agency. And we've got some other things in the pipeline in terms of creating investment funds and a few other things, but it would all be very ancillary to our short-term rental operations. That is still our primary driver, but the strategy is to still keep focused and keep local.
Watch this space then, huh? So final question, what does scaling mean to you?
It's a good question. I think it comes up it comes up a lot. Scaling obviously is such an important component. One needs to scale, one needs to continue to grow, one needs to continue to grow revenue at a higher proportion to what your cost base is growing. I think that we as an industry get a little bit hung up on scaling at all costs, on property acquisition, on taking on tens, hundreds of units across different geographical locations, which is great. It's ambitious. I think that's an important component for any successful and thriving business to be able to achieve. But I think scaling for me really means about ensuring that you're selecting the right kind of properties and the right owners, which are able to add to your brand reputation and add to your GBV and your gross booking sort of generation in a meaningful way. Scaling for us is not about just kind of going hammer and tongs and try to find any unit possible. It's more about making sure that we are able to build and curate really, really good quality, deep and long-term relationships with our homeowners, and they work with us. We've got a very low churn rate, and a lot of our owners work with us and are still working with us since 2003. I had one of our owners, he was just in our office yesterday, has been with us for 21 years. You know, long-term relationships create the asset base. They create the ability for you to create meaningful strategic targets and sort of give you really, really decent income projections and be able to build that reputation so that they can refer you on to others in the community. And word of mouth advertising in terms of scaling is probably the best form of advertising.
Amazing. It's an amazing story, Nick. Thank you so much for sharing it. Thank you to the listeners. And once again, you're listening to the Off the Scale podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Louise.